Welcome everyone to our statewide advocates call here at Democracy, North Carolina in June of 2023. We are so happy that you have decided to join us today. We've got a great program for you, a lot of good information, ways for you to get involved, and of course, we'll have answers to all of your questions. As we are presenting, you may have questions, and so we're going to ask you to put those questions in the chat boxes or your friends when it comes to these webinars. So again, as we're going forward, if you have a question or comment, please put it in the chat. The first question you might have is, who am I? I mean, I know my name is on the screen here, but who is this guy talking to you? Well, my name is Marquez Thompson. It's spelled a little weird, but it's Marcus Thompson. I'm the organizing director here at Democracy, North Carolina. I've been with the organization since 2016, and I'm so happy to be with you here today. And so again, we put this presentation together because there was so much that was happening with the Supreme Court, with the General Assembly. There was so much, so we wanted to have a time to bring all advocates across the state together to talk about what was happening and then also what our plans were to combat some of these bad things that were happening. So if you're here today and if you signed up for this, and maybe if someone that you know signed up for it, but they weren't able to be here for whatever reason, just know that everyone that registered for this training or this webinar will receive the following. So you will get this slide deck. You will get a recording of this training. You also get some talking points and some fact sheets. Again, we're going to go over a lot of things, bills and all these kind of things. And so we'll give you talking points. We'll give you fact sheets. So if you don't catch it all here, you don't have to be taking tremendous notes. We will be providing this information for you. And also, as I said, we plan all this stuff to let you know what was happening, but also ways that you can help, things that you can do to affect what's happening. And so we'll also be sending along those volunteer opportunities that we'll be talking about during this webinar. So you're going to get a lot. We have a lot here for you today. So let's get right into it. So I was happy to be your host, but I'll get a chance to kick it off to great members of our policy team, Carol and JP. And so I'm going to let them take it away as they inform you about all the things that's been happening in our state lately.
Hi, everyone. It's so great to see folks on this call. My name is Carol Moreno, and I am the Policy and Programs Manager at Democracy NC. Definitely seeing some familiar names in the chat, so happy to answer any questions as we're going along, and just want to throw out another reminder that if anything isn't clear, feel free to drop that in the Q&A section. And with that, I'll throw it over to my comrade, JP.
Thanks, Carol. To kick this off, we got to start with the courts. Y'all probably heard about some major court cases earlier this year that were reheard, changed. And in our chat, I saw one of our local experts on court cases. I'll let him introduce himself in the chat if he wants to. But I'm just going to give you a quick overview here. So first, there was Holmes v. Moore. This was a case that would have restored the state's racially discriminatory voter ID law, raises the bar for proving discriminatory intent, and creates a new barrier to vote as soon as this year. So what this means, voter ID, it was introduced in North Carolina, it was struck down in North Carolina, it's back in North Carolina. Beginning with this year's municipal elections, you will need a voter ID. You will need a photo identification to vote. The next major case that we were paying attention to this year was Harper v. Hall. So this opens the door again for extreme partisan gerrymandering in North Carolina. Some of you may be familiar with that unfortunate slogan that's attached to the state of targeting voters with surgical precision. This bill would just make that worse, or not bill, case. This would be giving politicians the power to redraw state legislative and congressional maps and allows them to pack and crack voters ahead of 2024. And for the rest of our cases, I'll pass it back to Carol.
Thanks, JP. The next one is probably familiar to some of y'all, especially if you've been working with us for a while, and that's CSI versus Moore. This is the case that granted voting rights for folks that were coming out of their felony sentences. And we saw those folks re-enfranchised in this last general election when the case was previously decided. But when the state Supreme Court decided to rehear this case, we did see that about 56,000 North Carolinians now no longer have the ability to vote. So what we can kind of expect with what is to come in municipal elections and the next elections is that the State Board of Elections will be letting folks know that their registration is being canceled. And that is a shift in who has access now to the ballot. And I know some of the questions we've been getting in some of our regional coalition calls is what you can do to help these folks. Definitely, if you're hearing people having questions, please feel free to connect them to us. We'd love to also connect them to our partners at Forward Justice in response to some of those changes. And then at the states, at the U.S. Supreme Court level, we also have Morphy Harper. I know folks have been hearing about this case for more than a year now. If you are working with our partners at Common Cause, you've probably been to one of the roadshow events. You've heard us talk about the independent state legislature theory, and you're like, when is that coming down? Any day now. We still have not heard a decision, but one little bit of good news is that we did hear a new case, Allen versus Milligan, that actually brought a good thing to ensuring that racial gerrymandering is something that we can hold elected officials accountable to. The case that was decided did provide a little bit more support to the Voting Rights Act. So that's a little bit of a quick summary on some of the cases, and JP is going to kind of talk about what's next in terms of voter ID specifically.
Thank you, Carol. So today is June 22nd. Some of you may have heard that a public comment portal was opened through the State Board of Elections around voter ID rules. What this means is we can influence and submit public comments about the rules implementing voter ID logistically at the polls and for the mail-in voting process. It does not mean that we can comment on voter ID itself. That being said, since this is one of the only public forums being offered to us, if you do feel compelled to say that you do not like voter ID, you do have an opportunity with this public comment period. You should have received guidance from Democracy NC if you're on our mailing list earlier this week about what would make a good public comment in this context. But I would love for everybody on this call to submit something to the State Board of Elections by tomorrow's deadline. June 28th will be the deadline for universities and colleges to submit applications to have those college and university IDs approved as valid forms of photo identification. DemNC, Black Alliance, Common Cause, and other partners have sent a memo to just about every college in the state, trying to make sure that they know who needs to fill out that application. But if you have any direct contacts at universities and colleges, I would encourage you to call them and say, hey, get that application in. And then this fall, again, like we said, we have municipal elections. Voter ID will be active. So as soon as you go to vote this year, you will need an ID. The bottom line there, folks, get an ID that is issued by the government. That one will be safe, according to our information. They're not going to touch DMV licenses. They're not going to touch federal IDs. But we do know that the DMV is super backed up. For me, just trying to get my license renewed last year, it took 6 months because it was one of those situations I had to go into the office. So please make sure that you, your friends, your family have up-to-date photo identification for the upcoming elections. One other note on the university ID application deadline, June 28th may seem very soon. It is, it's like in a week. There will be another opportunity for universities and colleges to apply for their IDs to be approved before the 2024 elections. So these are temporary rules that go into effect for the municipal elections. There will be a bit more wiggle room going into next year. And I'm going to pass it off to somebody way more inspiring than myself, Miss Linda Sutton, the award-winning, the incomparable. Take it away, Miss Linda.
Okay, JP, the check is in the mail, okay? So good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Linda Sutton in the Central Piedmont region from Alamance to Rockingham and going through Guilford, Forsyth, and Rowan, and all counties surrounding. So if you're from the Central Piedmont region, thank you so much. So you've heard the challenges before us as voters here in our state. Those communities who will be voting as early as this fall, it is critical that we're prepared, that we make a plan to vote and know the rules being required to show an approved photo ID. So this is where you are needed. Help guard against this and other anti-voter rules. You, our longtime dedicated voting rights advocates, can help by pledging right now that you will talk to at least 5 people, letting them know about the ID requirement, and also encouraging them to make a plan to vote. Then ask those 5, talk to 5 others, talk to groups, talk in meetings. We have to spread the word. We progressed by word of mouth before we ever had cell phones and Zoom calls and social media. So remember that people will listen to people they know. So here in North Carolina, we continue to have hundreds of thousands of voters who are eligible to vote, but do not show up. We've got to do more to get people voting in mass again. But can you give us a thumbs up or say yes in the chat that you will take this pledge and get others to do the same? Talk to 5 people, talk to them about making a plan to go vote. We just want to see your confirmation. Just do a thumbs up is fine. But know that we can make a difference when we all work together, when we all participate. And I'm counting on all of our advocates, not just the ones in my region, but all our advocates across North Carolina. Do not give up. You've got to forge ahead continuing this work, because as you can see, it's going to take all of us to make sure that our elections are fair, accessible, and without barriers to our ballot. I don't know about you, but my vote is sacred to me, and I will continue to fight for it no matter what stumbling block they throw in my path. And that's why I will be monitoring and watching the implementation of voting changes in order to protect my own vote. So thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you for not giving up on our democracy. Thank you for taking the pledge.
That's right. Thank you, Miss Linda. All right. So I'm going to keep it moving here. Y'all, this next slide right here, this fall, we have a special redistricting session coming up. I mentioned the court case earlier that opened us up to what's likely to be more gerrymandering. To be honest with y'all, we need a whole other SAC call just about redistricting when it comes closer to that time. So in the interest of time, I'm going to keep it moving a little bit. And we're going to get back into these bills that are moving quickly. These are happening this week, next week, the week after. And it's not a coincidence that it's right around the holidays, right around the time people are not paying as much attention, right? So I think I'll pass it over to Carol, our resident lobbyist, to give us an overview of these bills.
Thanks, JP. Before I get started on that, I did just want to touch very quickly on a couple of questions in the chat, just so that folks can have them answered. I know those around voter ID that I thought was a great question was if you need a North Carolina real ID, you won't need a North Carolina real ID, a standard ID issued by North Carolina or another DMV entity is sufficient. And I saw another question about fines for the CSI versus Moore case. Those folks won't be able to cast their ballot. So the fines was a previous issue, but no longer something that will apply because they won't be able to have that vote counted. And then I think I saw something great in the chat about whether university IDs will impact students out of the state. That is not something we're aware of at this time. So I don't believe there's any any ability for that to be something that would impact them if they were using their student IDs. So not to worry in that regard, but some really great questions, and people can keep dropping things in the Q&A section. We can stop as we're going along and kind of make sure we're addressing some of those. But as JP just shared, this has been a really busy legislative session. We've seen a lot of different elections bills, a lot of local elections bills, and what I'm just focusing on today are some of the bills that are moving. So just know that there's a whole lot of other things out there that could be heard or move at any time, and we'll let you know if that happens. But our biggest concern right now is Senate Bill 747, the Elections Omnibus Bill. This bill had different bills that were introduced this session incorporated within it, and some of these bills are ones that we've seen for several years now. A couple of them were even vetoed by the governor in previous sessions, and I'm going to kind of get into why they're a concern for us. But the first thing I want to name is that this bill has already passed the Senate. So it actually passed last night, and we've been sending out some resources for y'all about it. But if this is your first time hearing, I'm going to break it down a little briefly and give you some updates on some of the amendments we just saw as well, and how it'll impact voters. So you can go to the next slide, JP. One of our biggest concerns is that this bill impacts same-day registration. So groups that are more likely to use same-day registration are typically younger voters that are casting their ballot during the early voting period. And the current law in North Carolina is that if you show up to cast your ballot during same-day, while you're same-day registering, and you can vote a normal and regular ballot. What this bill would change is that you would no longer be able to do that in North Carolina. You'd have to cast a provisional ballot, and it would take longer for your ballot to be processed. You'd also have to bring additional documentation when you're trying to correct your ballot that is very similar to what is already required. And if you think of students specifically that are showing up to early voting sites that might not have transportation, might not have a lot of time to come back, the fact that they are now going to have to go through this process is really burdensome, and it's burdensome to anyone who maybe chooses early voting, which is the most popular voting method, because it's easier for them. So that is one major concern. The next one, if we go to the next slide, JP, thank you, is that this bill really, more so than anything, attacks voters that choose to cast their ballots when they're voting by mail. Who is that? That's typically older folks that want to do it for health reasons. That's folks with that are voters with disabilities. That's a lot of different populations that cast their ballots through mail for a lot of different reasons. And the way that this bill makes it harder is that it makes the deadline earlier. So if previously in North Carolina, we had about 3 days after Election Day to have those ballots come in, and we actually just had a canvass monitoring process in the general election where a lot of our reports were telling us ballots are still coming in late in the mail. There are several examples of counties in Davidson and Stokes where a person sent their ballot in on time and it still took about 21 days to reach the County Board of Elections office. So we know that's a big concern. The other thing is that it would now require a signature matching software, and something that was just changed last night. So y'all are the first to hear it, is that they did change this bill so that now that would only apply to 10 counties. But we do have still significant concerns around that, because if we had signature matching software implemented in our state and we had a 2-witness signature requirement, we'd be the only state to do that. At that point, you would be able to say that there is no point in voting by mail if they're adding all these restrictions, because it is going to lead to much higher levels of ballots being discounted. This bill also allows people to cast higher rates of voter challenges for absentee ballots and during early voting. And for folks that might not be aware of this, we often do see this happening around the canvass process, where there are mass voter challenges that are filed by groups that are typically dismissed because they haven't backed up those challenges in any way. And then what has been very puzzling to us is that it also, lastly, requires a 2-factor authentication process. This is something we're hearing might change. It could have even changed, if I'm being honest, last night in amendments. I don't believe it did, but this is one thing that would also be very new for North Carolina and for the country. So if we go to the next slide, another just keeps on going, long list of things in this bill, is that it would particularly impact immigrant communities because it would require for jurors to report information of people who, when they were completing their juror form, said that they didn't qualify to be on jury duty. And there's a lot of reasons why people might mark that they don't qualify to be on jury duty, and it's not necessarily that they're always non-citizens. But the idea with this change is that this information would be shared with the State Board of Elections for them to remove these voters. And what we've seen in the past, if you go to the next slide, JP, is that there have been a lot of groups, vigilante groups, that have used that information to target immigrants. And there have also been investigations and audits by the State Board of Elections that have found that this process is actually not very efficient. It's not the best way to make sure our list maintenance process is up to date. And there have been changes in the bill to ensure that some of this information is made private. It's still very concerning that these voters would be targeted. And we go to the next slide. The other component of this is that it would prohibit any type of philanthropic funding from going to the State Board of Elections and to the County Board of Elections. And we saw in 2020, when we were dealing with COVID, that those funds were really necessary for providing additional funding to counties to hire more poll workers, to provide them hazard pay, to get them personal protective equipment. And we continue to have disasters in North Carolina where county boards might be seeing additional funding needs. And even though the county commissioners are the ones that fund the County Board of Elections, we know that there are a lot of counties that are continuing to see funding shortages. And even outside of that, next slide, our State Board of Elections continues to be underfunded year after year. And in this current legislative session, specific to voter ID funding, the House has only allocated about 3.5 million to voter ID implementation, when our State Board of Elections has requested 6.5 million. And even more interestingly, the Senate hasn't allocated anything. So when you're thinking about just the basic technology that needs to be updated around voter ID, any funding towards education, none of that is being provided by the Senate. And we know that right now they are in negotiations. So I'll have a link here pretty soon, but we really want to encourage you all to be talking to folks about the budget at this time, because that also impacts how we give people access to the ballot. Move forward. There are a few other things in there. Not going to get into it because I think we were told to stick to 15 and we're pushing that. And so I'm going to pass it to JP to talk about the next bill.
All right, y'all. Real quick before this next bill, which is it's gaslighting on a whole new level. No partisan advantage in elections. There are some excellent questions in chat. I know Carol is going to go through those and probably start answering some because they're questions we get a lot. And then lots of people talking about the signature matching and some of those implementation rules around voter ID. Those would be great things to include if you feel compelled to write a public comment to the State Board of Elections by tomorrow, because they are going to be looking at those logistical rules around implementation and matching IDs, signatures, things like that. Even though we can't change the law, great to have those concerns on the record. S749, no partisan advantage in elections. This would essentially be taking the State Board of Elections, which is under the governor's office at the moment and independent from the state legislature, and essentially pushing a lot of the responsibilities and rules around appointing county board and State Board of Elections members to the General Assembly. So currently, the way that our county boards and state boards are constructed, there is a majority depending on which party is in power. And this is specifically to avoid gridlock, right? This no partisan advantage in elections bill would create all even numbers of representation. Quick side note, the largest actual party in North Carolina is unaffiliated voters. Over 35% of us in North Carolina are registered unaffiliated, but there's no space for unaffiliated representation on these boards. It would be split half and half between Republicans and Democrats. The state board would increase to 8 members picked by each party, And it would be similar at the county level, but with 4 members instead of 8. And we know just how partisan everything is, that that's going to lead to gridlock more often than not. And if it ends up in gridlock, what happens? Then those decisions, whether it's about appointments or actual Board of Election decisions, would get kicked over to the General Assembly, where for decades in North Carolina, one party or the other has had a majority, if not a supermajority. The same exact idea was ruled unconstitutional 5 years ago. And if that wasn't enough, it was put on the ballot as a measure for voters to vote on themselves. And they rejected it in 2018 with 61% of the vote. That is consensus if I've ever seen it in an election. So what's even more concerning, in order to comply with current statutes, this would reduce EV sites, early voting sites, to 1, just the County Board of Elections office, if there is gridlock. So if a County Board of Elections in that 4-member setup is not able to agree on their early voting plans. So for example, Mecklenburg County last year, trying to get leases signed, temporary leases signed, and get all of those logistics in order. They were a bit late, but just for the midterms, they had over 20 early voting sites in Mecklenburg County. If there's gridlock at the county level, the State Board of Elections, or I'm sorry, the legislature would only allow 1 early voting site per county, whether there's 1 million or 100 people in that county, and it would be the county boards of elections. Some of y'all, like I think in Johnson County, some of our more rural areas, you'll know that the county boards of elections currently don't even operate as an early voting site because they do not have the capacity. It's not big enough, literally, right? So just totally nonsensical. What are we going to do about this, y'all? Lots of y'all asking in the chat, what do we do? What do we do? Here on this page, we're showing you our current targets in terms of who needs to learn a little bit more about the elections process, learn about election administration if they want to have any changes or contributions to how election administration is done in North Carolina. And shortly here, I'm going to pass it to my friend Lucas, who's going to tell you how to do this right here, legislative advocacy. The first thing you can do, though, is go to our website, demnc.co/legislative advocacy, and there you can find information about bills, as well as a link to find out who your representatives are. Carol, did you want to jump in here? Oh, getting some freezing from Carol.
We will be.
I don't know if that's me or if it's Carol.
Can folks hear me all right?
We
That's
can hear you
better.
now. You were frozen for a second.
Okay. I was just going to say we will be sharing out some talking points and added resources. So in addition to that website, we have some contact lists for folks and a script that we've sent out by email. If you need any of those resources, just know that it's coming your way. So you can take action. So just really appreciate it. And we'll keep working on answering those questions. So back to you, Lucas.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, and thank you, JP and Carol, for going over all of that as thoroughly but as quickly as possible, because that is quite the feat. I'm Lucas Sajo. I am the regional managing organizer in Eastern North Carolina. So that's Craven, Pitt, Edgecombe, Nash, towards the beach, not too far north. I like to draw boundaries for myself. So not the Northeast, just the East, that little sliver right there in the middle. I see some Pitt and some Craven and Greene County people here tonight. So it's always good to see y'all. And I use he, him pronouns, and we're going to talk a little bit about local meetings and how we can take this fight more to the local level as things progress. So I hope that you all are feeling energized by learning all of this. I hope that you're not feeling defeated. But there has just been a general feeling of just maybe hopelessness is the word, where there's so much happening that it feels a little overwhelming. But I want to encourage everyone here tonight to not feel that way, because we're currently sitting in a room of 70 people, and we're all here together to do this work. And furthermore, we're in here, we have our RMOs, we have our policy team, we have these people that we can work with and reach out to. So we're here, and that's the first step. And so leading into that, let's talk coalition meetings. So at least each month, us regional managing organizers, we really try to hold coalition meetings within our regions where we can bring advocates, different partners, different organizations together into one room or one virtual space, give updates about what we have going on, what they have going on, and really collaborate as to how we can work together within our region on the issues we're seeing. So this is a space that we facilitate where we can just have these conversations. We can tell each other about our frustrations. We can tell each other about the wins that we have or the things that we're working on currently. And we really can create a collaborative space where we can get stuff done. And hopefully, it should feel less overwhelming, because this, we feel like we have to take it on ourselves. That's why there's this feeling, why we feel so overwhelmed. But we're sharing it with one another. We're carrying that load, and we're taking this work, and we're doing one step at a time, breaking down those barriers one step at a time. And so following through with that, this focus on the local level, we have to start focusing on engaging with our local communities. It has to be one of our top priorities right now, because this fight, we're going to keep seeing a lot of stuff at the General Assembly, and we have to keep battling it. But this is a two-pronged fight. We also have to be in our communities, making sure that our voices are heard and we're representing those that we care about. So let's talk right quick about our Election Advocates Program. It's a program that we put on at Democracy NC. It's ran by Keith, who I don't know if he's still in here, but he was in here earlier. Shout out to Keith. I do everything for Keith. And so it's a program where we sign up and we have people who are committed monitors at their local boards of elections. You go out there, you take notes, you get to know who the Board of Elections are, you get to know who your county Board of Elections director is, and you speak up when you see things going on that may not be, and that may not be leading to free and fair elections, or when you see things that are a little bit strange to see, or when you have just general concerns and you want to ask them. Especially recently, we've had a lot of advocates go out there and asking questions about voter IDs, about what that looks like, what kind of equipment they have, what kind of software they need. So that's the place to be to get that information. And we already have a lot of great advocates in those roles across the state. For me personally, I got Minerva Freeman in Pitt County, who's on tonight. Michael Schachter in Craven County, he couldn't be here. Brenda Jones also in Pitt County as well. And hopefully more soon. As I said, we got people in Greene County, so hopefully they show up soon. But this is also a template that we can take and we can apply to other meetings within our areas too. If your focus is education, if that's your main worry right now, go to the Board of Education meetings and be there and take notes and listen to what's going on and speak up. If you're worried about budget and what the money's going in your area, too much money to policing, too much money or not enough money to the issues that you care about, go to your Board of Commissioner meetings, hear what's happening and speak up. In your local community, your town and your city council meetings, these are areas that you can go to and apply the same exact template to, of going there, learning everybody, taking notes, and bringing it back to your community to have these conversations. This is where we have to start right now. We have to start having these conversations. We have to start spreading this information. We have to make sure that we are fully engaged within our communities, because it's going to be that first step towards really kind of giving over this overwhelmed feeling by knowing who's around us and knowing how we can work together there. I don't know. So yeah, the best part is that everything that you need is on our website. We got all this up there, the training videos, there's election administration 101 manuals. And the best thing is that there's pre-made report forms. So you already know what you need to collect beforehand. So it's not just, oh, here's all this information. And you know what to be looking for when you go there. And there it is, made it as simple as possible. Right there's the wonderful link. Get up there, sign up. Keith will be in touch and we'll get this thing going. So that's what I have. Be in your communities, be engaged, and we'll get it all done as best as possible. Thank y'all.
Okay, hey everybody. My name is DeMonte Alford. I am the regional managing organizer out in southeastern North Carolina. That area includes Scotland, Robinson, Cumberland, Hoke, all the way to New Hanover. Really a child of southeastern North Carolina, so I don't want to cut off any of my counties. So I claim them all, even though there's a limited amount that I can physically work at one time. So there's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. If the personal is political, then the political has to be personable. One of the things that we can do to make the political personable is by having what we call events. Events are what we have to bring all our people in our coalitions, our communities, the people that we're organizing and activating out together. It is a natural part of our human nature to organize and break ourselves down into smaller units, correct? Whether you are in a sorority, a fraternity, whether you're a Mason, an Eastern Star, Shriner, part of your alumni association, even a part of your professional guild. Planning successful events involves building that coalition of folks that are going to be responsible to each other and holding each other accountable for reaching specific goals. I am able to call off the top of my head a couple of times in recent history and throughout the state of North Carolina in which the smallest block of recognized organizing, right, neighborhood, right, neighbor to neighbor organizing has made a big difference. I'm reminded of the opportunity that folks had over in, well, not really the opportunity, it was a misfortune opportunity in Greensboro, North Carolina, to fight back against the mega dump in East Greensboro. Community members pulled their resources together and fought really, really hard and were able to turn that away. I'm reminded of the time here, well, I'm from Scotland County, where people in my rural area were able to organize together to get stoplights and streetlights put in our neighborhood so that the road would be safe to the kids and the pedestrians at night. I think about a bunch of events that could be held, and it looks many different ways when you're holding events, whether it's letter writing parties, you're holding joy spaces, or whether it's pig pickings like in my community. From Manio to Murphy, from Liberty to Cape Hatteras, we need to organize. In case you folks didn't know, those are the extreme ends of the state. At Democracy North Carolina, we're what young folks call outside. We're in our communities fully engaged on a daily basis. With that being said, I would like to give a shout out to my folks, my friend turns that are working with me that are on the call, Jacob Locklear and Sydney Proctor. And to any of the folks on the call that are wondering would future fingers fill the torch, fret not. Our future is in good hands with our friend turns here at Democracy Summit. With that being said, in the words of my granddaddy, walk together, children, and don't you get weary. Once you said all you know, it's time to go. Kamaria, it's on you.
Thank you so much, DeMonte. My name is Kamaria Lawrence. I work as your Western Piedmont Regional Managing Organizer, which covers Mecklenburg, Cabarrus, Gaston, and Union counties. And sometimes we get some asks or we see needs in the surrounding counties. So now we're going to talk about crowd canvassing, which I personally think is one of the easiest things to do. And I do want to shout out to all of the volunteers that we have here who live in our region. I see you all. There's too many to call out, but I'm excited that you are joining us tonight. So how you can help with crowd canvassing at events or at busy locations in the community. Two that come to mind specifically is a few years ago, I would often crowd canvass at the transit center here in the city of Charlotte because there's always people just standing around. But we're going into summer. There's so much going on, whether it is a church celebration, whether it is a government meeting, such as a county commission meeting. If you are not happy with what is going on in your county, you may want to sit down with a group of trusted volunteers or trusted like-minded people and decide, okay, there's going to be a county commissioner meeting tonight, next week. And we need people to spread information, factual information using this literature. That's crowd canvassing because there's going to be people at this big meeting. But let's use an example from this past weekend. A lot of cities had a Juneteenth celebration. Now, this was a perfect time to crowd canvass. We have decided that our purpose is to do voter registration, nonpartisan voter registration, and spread information that is factual from the North Carolina Board of Elections on voter ID. Now, we decided how many volunteers are needed. If you only are expecting 100 people, you don't need 100 volunteers. You need as many as you think you could handle. We had roughly 5 to 10 people for a festival that brought on a few thousand individuals, because most of these people coming are going to be registered to vote. Most of these individuals coming have the correct ID. They have their driver's license. But from there, you want to be sure that you do something that's very important, but it seems too simple and a lot of us forget to do it. Check the weather. Your volunteers are not going to be outside walking around a festival, and people are not going to be at the festival if it is 1,000 degrees outside. We are in the South. Or if it's raining very hard and thunderstorming. So make sure you check the weather. If those things are taken care of, then you want to make sure you have necessary information, but straight to the point information. You don't want to be passing out phone books. You want to pass out good information that's bullet pointed and straight to the point. So, excuse me, review the message with your volunteers. Make sure you all understand the brief message, because you're only going to have a few moments with these individuals. They're trying to get on to the next carnival ride or trying to go over and buy something to eat. They don't want to stop the fun and listen to the facts. So make sure all your volunteers have working cell phones. Make sure that they have the literature. Make sure they have an ink pen if registering voters. And if possible, provide water or encourage them to bring their own water. Now, look happy, look excited, look very happy to be there. That's what you want all of your attendees to do or have, smiling faces. Then you're walking around, you're being engaging. You're not just sitting at a table. Sitting at a table gets you a few voter registration or a few informed attendees. Walking around and canvassing an event, that long line to the Ferris wheel, that long line to get a funnel cake will get you so much more, so many more contacts. That would be the better choice. So also, you want to make sure that you make it fun to be a volunteer. Something that I've done recently is create selfie frames. A selfie frame. I love to take photos. I love to be in a photo, but you want to make sure that your volunteers are having a good time. Selfie frames. You can go to Michael's or any store, maybe even Walmart, to get a mat that goes inside of your frame, the square. Decorate it how you want to decorate it. Maybe you want to put some of your stickers from your organization on there and all of that jazz. Make it fun. And they could even record short video clips. But make it fun to be a part of your call. Don't just be the person, are you registered to vote? Do you want to vote? Nobody's excited to talk to you. So be as fun as you know you can be and make it authentic. Maybe you have a brief personal story you can share with individuals that will make them stop and talk with you to register to vote, to sign up to be a volunteer, to sign your petition. Come to your next coalition meeting. You never know until you ask. Always assume a yes. Don't ever assume a no unless someone is clearly saying no and does not want to be bothered. But you'll get more people willing to talk to you. Now, some things that you want to make sure you have in closing is this. You want to have a trainer who's going to train everyone with your message and give the materials out. You want to get a canvas captain, someone to check in with. You want to make sure that there's sanitizer because COVID is still in the air, still a real thing for us. And you want to make sure all materials are returned to the appropriate person who will turn it into the Board of Elections if it's voter registration, or return the data if you are collecting this for Democracy North Carolina or your respective organization. But it can be fun, organized, dress comfortably, and make it happen. Thank you so much. And I'm passing this off to my teammate, Sujalima.
Thanks, Kamaria. I'm going to keep it real brief. I know it's almost time. And my name is Sugalema Lynch. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the organizer in the Greater Triangle region covering Wake, Harnett, and Johnston counties. So shout out to everybody who came from those regions. Thank you for being here. And I'm just here to share other ideas with you for ways that you could support our communities and overall mission at Democracy North Carolina. You've heard a lot of great ideas, and sometimes maybe you want to work more behind the scenes in regards to organizing. Some things, you know, writing LTEs, letters to the editor, or op-eds are always a great option. It's always nice to keep those things out there to let, you know, the public know how you feel. Making a list, something that's really helpful for me is having help with having somebody help me make a list of events in your community. Because you probably know more people that I know, and you know, if we can get a list of events where we know that there will be a lot of people, that would be really helpful. Helping out by mapping your community to help Democracy NC disperse information. You know, maybe there's sharing a list of faith-based community organizations, local nonprofits, food pantries, shelters, community clinics, universities, HBCUs, and other small local businesses in your area. So again, places that we can hit and share information with. Another just simple way to volunteer is helping us find locations for meetings, trainings, or teach-ins. You know, covering so many counties, there's only so much we can get around, but if you're there and you know the neighborhood, you know, you can help us by just, again, finding those locations. And you know, reserving a room at your local library is huge. And you know, what's your favorite restaurant? What are great places you think would be a good meeting place? So many possibilities to use your skills as volunteers. If you have other ideas, please share. And again, I just want to wrap up by saying, really the theme of all of these ideas is building relationships with as many people as possible in our community, and influencing them to understand how voting impacts their lives and why their vote matters. And that's all I have. So back to you, Marquez.
So I want to thank each and every one of our organizers, from Miss Linda, who got us started earlier in the program, to you, Shug, and all in between. Thank you, each and every one of you, for those ideas. So as we said, there was a lot of things that have happened, a lot of bad things, but there are a lot of things that we can do to help this effort. And so the most important thing to think about is, with all these ideas that we presented, all the things that we talked about, we are here to help. These are things that we want you to help us to do. We're going to be doing these things in the community, and we need your help to do them. So the question is, how would you like to help? And so right here and now, we're going to do a poll where you can let us know which of these things, these 5 things that we talked about, ways that we're going to push back against these bills and these Supreme Court decisions and all that's going on, ways that you say, you know what, these things resonate with me. I want to sign on. We saw some people in the chat that were saying, hey, you know, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do something. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take a record. I didn't know we could do this in Zoom, so I was educated about this. We're actually going to take a record of what you sign up for here and now, and we'll be following it up from you. So if you live in a region, you'll be getting a call or a follow-up from your regional managing organizer, one of the 5 people that you just heard from recently. If you live outside of our regions, you'll either be hearing from me or some of the other members of the Democracy NC staff. And so we are going to be in touch with you for, I see some people say all of the above. Thank you, Latasha. So yeah, let us know. We're going to give it just a few more minutes, and then we'll end this poll. I do want to shout out some of the people that we have staff. We have Manny here. I thought my brother from a partner organization, Gino. And I also really wanted to highlight, we also have a new organizer that is just getting started, who is on the call, and you'll get to meet her pretty soon too. Especially you'll be working with her if you live in the Western region. But I also wanted to highlight, very early on in the meeting, you saw Vote Riders. They had some information. And so we will be, because they'll be our partner helping us. If you do run into someone that needs a photo ID, they have a lot of tools and capacity to help those people get their IDs. And so we'll be partnering with them in that work to make sure that everyone that wants to vote has the proper identification. So we'll be sending that information along with you guys as well as our partner doing this work. So I think we have enough time for the see the results of the poll. A lot of people are are involved. A lot definitely want to help 5 people. Miss Linda being so inspirational. Attending local coalition meetings. We look forward to meeting you there. We see people across the board. Eden, I'm looking forward to some of these new ideas and some of the creativity that Shug mentioned that we'll get to work with you on going forward. So now, that is what has happened. You heard what has happened and what they've done. You heard what we're going to do and what we're going to do together. So I want to know, we want to use the last bit of the time that we have now to find out if there are any questions that you have that we haven't already answered. And again, if we don't get a chance to answer them, you put them in the chat, we can follow up with you through email as well to answer your questions. So I'm going to stop now and see if there are any questions that we need to get answered. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but did we mention about the County Board of Elections taking photos? I don't remember if Carol mentioned that.
So, Miss Linda, do you mean about the free CBOE IDs?
Yes.
Yeah, so under the voter ID law, it's technically required that if somebody doesn't have an ID, but they're eligible for an ID, that they are entitled to a voter ID, like a literal voter ID issued by the County Board of Elections. I think that this is a great fallback, backup plan for anybody. We should still prioritize, though, the government IDs. And here's the main reason why. Carol talked a little bit about how they're trying to limit even philanthropic donations to county boards of elections. We really don't want to let people think that they can wait until the last minute and get a county board of elections ID and then find out that the county board of elections is out of funding and literally cannot produce that for them. So Linda, thank you so much for lifting that up. We are technically entitled to free IDs from the county board of elections. The sooner the better. If you want one of those special voter IDs, even if it's just some sort of weird keepsake from this era of anti-democracy in North Carolina, get to your county boards of elections as soon as possible. Has the free ID become available yet? Technically, no, because funding has to be finalized for voter ID. And that's something that maybe Carol could speak more specifically to, because that's something, again, that's happening at the NCGA.
Yeah, this question came up, I know, from some of our Central Piedmont folks as well. So currently, all county boards of elections should still have a voter ID printer that was provided to them the last time the law was administered. However, it's been a couple of years, maybe even a little bit longer. So it could be the case that some of those county boards have a printer that no longer is functioning. I know we've heard that from some of our folks that we've been calling when we do our CBOE outreach. So another good example of how I saw this being the highest percentage, if you want to engage with county board elections members, it'd be great to ask them, have you checked on your printer lately? So that's why we're saying right now, it's going to take a little bit of time before they have those available at all counties. That's a great question. And I think we'll throw it over to Julia, who might be able to pull out some of the other questions we have from folks so we can wrap up soon.
Yeah, I think we got to most of the questions that were in the Q&A form. I just saw this one from Diane, which Bill was addressing, the BOE funding. Yeah, I think, and I've taken notes of, by the way, there were comments and clarifications throughout the chat, and I've made notes of those so we can follow up in an email that will have the links to the slides and all of the links, because we know we just threw a lot at you, both verbally and in the chat. So we'll make sure that is all in the follow-up email.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. I see one question about university IDs from David Mendoza. In terms of necessary, so they will have to apply. If university IDs were previously approved the last time we had voter ID, they do need to reapply. The current application cycle for having university and college IDs approved ends on June 28th or 29th, I believe. But if a college or university does not meet that deadline, they will have another opportunity before the 2024 elections to submit an application and have those IDs approved. So the deadlines that we gave you earlier in this presentation Those pertain to the municipal elections this year, and most of those are temporary rules. And there will be another opportunity for us to get those university IDs approved next year.
Right. Thank you, you guys. I want to really quickly, as we close up, give a big shout out and thank you to our interpreters and to our comms director, Julia, who is the voice that you heard recently. We also want to shout out Zakari, who has been behind the scenes, another member of the comms team. Anything that you see one of us do at Democracy North Carolina, know that there is an army behind them. And part of that army is you as volunteers. But when the work that we have, that you see us get done, know that there are a lot of people that are behind the scenes that make it happen. And so we're so thankful for those people. So I know it's 7:02. We wanted to get you out tonight, but thank you so much for attending this webinar. Thank you for being someone that cares about your community and that is willing, most importantly, those of you that are willing to help us fight for the things that we see being threatened, our very democracy. And so knowing, just like it was already said earlier, I think Lucas said it and Miss Linda and DeMonte mentioned it, if we all work together, despite what they do, we can overcome. And so tonight is just one more step in that journey of pushing back and overcoming what they're trying to do. So thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to working with you locally throughout the rest of this year and onward into 2024 as we continue to work together to fight for our democracy. Thank you so much for joining us.